Well, joining us now to discuss the situation in Iraq as well as the domestic political situation when it comes to taking military action against the Islamic State is Peter Hartcher, the international editor and the political editor of the Sydney Morning Herald, so perfectly positioned to comment on this. Peter, how likely do you think it is that Australia will participate in military action against the Islamic State?
It's highly likely now. It's not that the US would need Australian firepower, but the US does want, and this is actually quite smart, maximum buy-in by the maximum number of countries to make this an international solution rather than an American act of war.
And indeed, we might expect Australia and Britain to participate, but it would be more important to have countries from the Middle East participate.
Absolutely. Look, the reason that the situation is so chaotic and dangerous today, there's a direct line of causality with the last venture led by the US, supported by Britain and Australia, into Iraq a decade ago, that took an ugly but very stable regime and country and turned it into a seething cauldron of international instability. It has been an unmitigated disaster. We are going back a decade later to try and solve the problem. So one of the main lessons, well, first the Hippocratic oath, do no harm. So this has to be intelligently done. This is not dropping bombs to kill people. That was the mistake that the coalition made last time, thinking it was that simple. This is a political problem and it requires a political solution. Killing a few people here or there will make no real difference in the long run. So it must be a local solution. The Iraqi government must be leading it, and it must be, and this is the critical part, it must be supported by the regional Sunni governments, Sunni regimes around the region. Essentially, Chris, this is a schism between the two halves, the two great churches within Islam, the Sunnis and the Shia. Now, what this international coalition is contemplating is taking sides to support a Shia regime in Iraq against a Sunni uprising. Now, we have to think very hard before taking sides decisively in a sectarian civil war like that. But that's what it would appear, unless there are Sunni governments in the region buying in, like the Saudis, the Qataris, and others that the Americans are trying to bring in.
Very difficult for the Americans because, in a sense, they would be siding with, say, the Iranians, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, versus their traditional allies, the Saudis.
That is precisely right. So, you know, if you just take a reflexive, let's kill the bad guys that we see on the TV doing brutal things, we are going to be fighting on the same side as Bashar al-Assad. Now, it's been US policy for 3 years to try and get rid of him, but now this coalition would be supporting him. The US has been in a state of hostility with Iran for years, but as you say, we'd now be supporting Iran. So this is done badly. This could be a really stupid, counterproductive thing. It must be intelligent, and there must be buy-in by as many regional governments as possible.
So this Islamic State, it appears to be one of the most extreme, abhorrent regimes you can imagine. But it does have support, doesn't it? It does have support amongst some of the Sunni population there in Iraq, simply because they're being treated so badly by their national government.
Well, exactly, and that's the reason that the Iraqi National Army, large parts of it, collapsed. At the least pressure, they melted away, because they were Sunnis who couldn't fight fellow Sunnis because they thought they had a bloody good argument to make. So that's exactly right. This is not just a bunch of outlaws that have to be whacked. This is a big political problem that needs a political solution. Now, military force is probably going to be inevitably a part of that solution, but it's got to be part of a much bigger picture. Otherwise, we're just going to mess the thing up, and we'll be there for years. We'll be back again in a few years more. This will be like a tar baby from which there is no disentangling. The other consequence, Chris, too, is if we inflame, if we go in heedlessly and brainlessly and make a hash of this again, then we inflame the situation not only in Iraq, Syria and the Middle East, we also inflame the situation here in the Islamic community in Australia. We give more cause and more outrage to more people to want to put their hands up to become jihadis. And secondly, we do the same with Muslim communities elsewhere, including Indonesia. Now, is that what we really want to achieve? This has to be intelligent, has to be international, with as many participating countries using as many tools of solution as possible.
So if military intervention is to work as an adjunct to a greater political solution,
yes,
what are the limitations we might expect on the military operation?
Well, the military operation should be guided by local forces. It should be guided by the Iraqi government, the Kurdish Peshmerga, the people who know and understand the situation on the ground. The other limitation is that sending an invasion force of troops is an entanglement that nobody wants. The Iraqi government doesn't want it, the US isn't proposing it, and Australia certainly doesn't want it.
Now, one of the problems with the Islamic State is it straddles the borders of Iraq and Syria. Is there any prospect of taking any military action against the Syrian side of the border? And do you have a problem that if you don't do that, that these people will simply retreat back into the sanctuary of Syria?
Well, that's exactly one of the dilemmas. It's like trying to, when the coalition was in Afghanistan, trying to kill Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, they would retreat over the border into Pakistan, where they were untouchable, and then they'd come back again when it suited them. So this, again, is an argument for not just a boneheaded reflex if as the problem drop a bomb, which is one of the causes of all this. Again, it's an argument for trying to get maximum political buy-in by as many governments in the region as possible.
Okay, let's look at the domestic political situation in Australia. What are the, if we can put it in crude terms, the political opportunities and dangers for the Abbott government in this?
Well, at the moment, the whole national security side of business is a political asset for the Abbott government at a time when domestic affairs, and particularly the budget, is a liability. So the temptation there is that the government overplays the international picture, overplays possible military action, very likely military action, in order to play up its political credentials, in order to overcome the weakness of its performance in the domestic side of the House. Now, getting overexcited can easily happen. I think already there are signs that the government is tempted to be over-enthusiastic. Yesterday, we saw the Prime Minister announce in the House that the federal government has set up counter-terrorism units in 2 airports, Sydney and Melbourne, and would set up counter-terrorism units to spot jihadis in other capital cities later. Well, if I'm a jihadi, I just learned, courtesy of the Prime Minister, that I'm going to leave via Adelaide or Brisbane. So was that smart to announce that before all the arrangements are in place? Or was the Prime Minister anxious to have a further announcement, a new initiative? So I think that temptation to make premature announcements, perhaps to get a little overexcited and ahead of the game, will be there and must be resisted.
But you can understand the temptation there for the government, given that some of the divisions are already starting to emerge in the Labor Party with this sort of allegations by Sue Lyons and others that the government is using this to cover up its domestic problems.
Yes, that's exactly right. And, you know, the government will hope that people like Labor people, like and including Sue Lyons, will keep that up, because it gives the government a perfect opportunity to attack Labor. Labor so far has been extremely careful, punctilious, at least at the leadership level, of keeping in absolute conformity with the government on all national security, counter-terrorism, Iraq, Syria matters. So these cracks will be pounced upon gleefully by the government, no doubt. I think Sue Boyce is just wrong, by the way. These are. I mean, what the government is saying, I think, on this is exactly right today. These are real problems. These are real threats, and Australia does have to deal with them. But as you say, needs to be done seriously and soberly, not as some exercise in political enthusiasm.
Okay, Peter Hartcher, thanks for your insights today.
Pleasure, Chris.